Shelton, Senior Pastor of the Fellowship of the Inner Light. His topic is service, and I cannot think of anyone more qualified than Bruce to speak about service, because Bruce is the embodiment of one who is dedicating his life to helping others. He tells us that June 1st will mark the 50th anniversary of his playing a job role that is of service to others. And I can tell you from personal experience that his service has been so much more than a job role. When I was going through my own semi-dark night of the soul, it was Bruce who was there supplying both the emotional and material assistance that got me through to being happy again. When we of the fellowship family talk of our relationship with Bruce, I hear stories again and again. Yes, Bruce is the one who helped me when, through all kinds of difficult situations. He and his wife Marty, who just recently passed away, for many years have served as a kind of mother and father to the fellowship family. We are so blessed to have both of them as part of our lives. Bruce retired from state service in 2003, following 33 years as working as a probation and parole officer and juvenile group home director. For the past 17 years, he has served as a licensed clinical social worker with a specialty in addictions work. Bruce will talk today about service, always from personal experience in his own life. We are blessed today to have Bruce Shelton as our speaker.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Sharon. What a beautiful introduction. Appreciate that. I'm Bruce Shelton, and it's my tradition when I speak here at the church to ask you to help me with this talk. I would like for us all just to be quiet just for a few moments, and let's tune into spirit, and let's affirm that God will use me as his minister this morning to say exactly the words that you most need to hear this morning. So just be silent for a few moments with me. Thank you. Amen. So, as Sharon was saying, this is June 1st will mark my 50th year working in a profession in which I have had the great opportunity to be of service to others. And so I thought this would be a good time in my life just to stop, take a look, and share with you my journey these past 50 years, and hopefully provide you with some inspiration to be of service to others yourself. I've divided my talk into three parts. The first part, I'd like to just share with you a little bit about my personal job history and my journey. And then I'd like to talk about this whole idea of service from a spiritual perspective. And then number three, I'd like to share with you my personal success for what has enabled me to do this work for so many years and to do it with just to constantly go back and love doing the work. I'd like to share with you my personal secret on that. All right, so June 1st, 1970, 50 years ago, I started my first job. I was 23 years old. I had my degree in psychology from ODU. I had just spent 2 years in the Army. 23 years old, didn't know what I was going to be doing with my life. I did know I wanted a job in which I could help people, but that was not unusual. After all, I was a child of the 60s. We all wanted to help everybody, make the world a better place like JFK and LBJ told us to do. And so I'm looking for a job, and this job opened up as a juvenile probation officer in Virginia Beach. Now, I didn't really know what this job was all about, but I applied for it, got the job, and the way they trained us back then was they said, well, spend the first week in court. just observe the proceedings. And that was a milestone in my life, because after that week I said, this is really worthwhile doing. Here we are working in a court system that's all set up to try to help young kids, help their parents to get their lives together and get on with their lives. If we're successful in doing this, we also help the community, because people who might be victims of crimes, they're no longer victims. So it's a win-win for everybody. So I was, right that first week, I could tell this is really what I wanted to do. I didn't know it would be for the next 50 years, but I knew this is what I wanted to do right then. And so the next week they gave me, a couple of weeks later, I guess, they gave me a caseload of 30 kids. And those kids did more to teach me about psychology than those 4 years at ODU in terms of how to work with people. And they were my teachers. And all my career here, the greatest teachers I've had has not been from books. It's always been from the people I've worked with. They're the experts. They're the ones that teach me what the problem is, how to solve it. And so after a year of working as a juvenile probation officer, I decided, well, if I'm going to stay in this field, I really need to take advantage of my GI Bill and get a master's in social work. So I spent the next 2 years at the School of Social Work at Virginia Commonwealth University, got my degree there. 1973 now, I got a job, got out, and of course, this whole pattern, one thing I've learned, and I'm sure most of you have learned in your lives, that things don't happen by accident. It wasn't by accident that I got that job as a juvenile PO. It was just meant to be. It was part of my life plan. So now I'm finding myself working in juvenile group homes. I worked in 2 juvenile group homes over the next 5-year period. As assistant director of one and the director of the second. And juvenile group homes were incredible, because you had these, in the second home I was in, I had 10 kids that had all been to the Beaumont Learning Center, which basically is a juvenile prison. And they were coming back home. Now, just to go to a center like that, they called them training schools back then. Just to go to a school like that, you had to do a lot. The juvenile court tried not to incarcerate people. But these kids had done a lot, and they were coming back, and their problems were so severe they couldn't just go right back home. They needed a transitional experience. And so they were put into this home. And so my job with a staff, 5 staff members, was to basically not only provide a custodial, meet their custodial needs, but also to help them to grow as individuals. So it was a wonderful job. It was a wonderful opportunity to be of real help to people. One of the things I remember I learned from that is that when I was a juvenile probation officer, we used to think, well, the parents are the problem. These kids act like this because of their parents. Well, when I was in a juvenile group home, I was playing a parent surrogate role. And I learned why the parents acted the way they did. And so I no longer blame the parents. The parents certainly might have their work to do on themselves, but it's not just the parents. I learned that in working as a parent surrogate in these juvenile group homes. Anyway, 1979, I had a career shift. I liked corrections, but I decided to go into adult corrections, and so I took about a 5-month sabbatical in which I just relaxed, which was a really smart thing to do. And then I looked around, and there was a job open as an adult probation and parole officer, Virginia Beach Circuit Court. I applied for that, got that job, really liked it. It was a perfect job for me. The next 24 years I spent working as an adult probation and parole officer with the Virginia Beach Circuit Court. I've always looked at all the work I've done when I have an opportunity to help people as a great honor, just to have that opportunity to be of service. And I tell you, in probation and parole, people really need help. The criminal justice system, the correction system, is a very brutal, dark system. I say that because prisons and jails are brutal and dark. There's no other better way to put it. They're tough. You can imagine a bunch of human beings just locked up in a cage, and that's essentially what jails and prisons are all about. So if I can somehow bring a little bit of light into these places of darkness, into the lives of people, what a great opportunity, what a great joy that it brought to me over the years. And that's what I've done my best to do during that 23-year period. I worked for about 10 years. I had a caseload of about 120 people, and then these were individuals who had a wide range of individual differences in terms of the crimes they committed. On one end, I had one time I had a guy who was with the mob. He was actually a hitman for the mob up in New York City. He got into the victim witness protection program run by the federal system, and eventually somehow ended up in Virginia Beach, and he was on my caseload. I can't even remember what the details were on that. But so I had guys like that on the one end, and on the other end, I had a fellow who, I'll never forget this guy. He was on probation because he was on the lines at an abortion clinic up in Washington, D.C., protesting abortions. He was a strong Catholic, standing up for his beliefs, got arrested, put on probation, and so I would go to work sometimes, and I'd go through the reception room, and all these guys are out there, kind of tough-looking guys, and over in the corner, there's a guy that looks like he's St. Francis from Assisi. That was my guy. And so my point here is that job was fascinating. I had just about everybody you can imagine to work with, and my job was I would always tell everybody, my job is not to put you in jail. My job is to help you to stay out of jail, but you got to do your part. It was tough love. You've got to do your part. You've got to obey the rules of society. You've got to be cooperative in terms of your conditions of your probation. And if you do that, then I can help you get through this. After about 10 years of working with a normal caseload, I became what they called the senior intensive probation officer. And this meant I had a smaller caseload of about 40 cases, and I also had a surveillance officer that worked with me. But these were the hardest cases in the system. These were the ones who needed the most attention, the most intensive supervision. And it was intense for them, and it was intense for me. I had two types of people in this. One was the high risk cases. These were the violent offenders, the folks who had been into prison and had for homicides, for sex offenses, and so forth, arsonists. Then on the other, so these were my violent offenders, and then on the other category were the high needs cases. These were the mentally ill and the substance abuse cases. A lot of times, folks with schizophrenia who weren't out robbing banks, but they would just use cocaine, and they'd get caught with cocaine and put on probation. They couldn't stop. They end up in prison. Now I'm working with them, and so they taught me all about schizophrenia. It was really educational for me, and I was glad to be able to help those ladies and gentlemen. Also, there were these substance abuse cases. This is the biggest group of people that I work with. I had, back in the 80s and 90s, cocaine was the big drug. And so I had a bunch of cocaine addicts. And these were people that were one step away from going to prison because they'd been given so many chances. And so the other probation officers would give these cases to me to try to help turn them around. So it was a very hot fire. It was a fiery dance for them and for me, because if they did not change, they had to go to jail. And so it was really tough, and I would do everything I could to help these folks, and these guys and gals taught me about addiction. And so when I retired from Department of Corrections in 2003, I had my license now as a clinical social worker. I liked this work. I wanted to continue doing this type of work outside of the criminal justice system, so I decided to specialize with addictions work. And so now the past 16 years, I've been working as a licensed clinical social worker, working with just lots of people. One of the biggest differences is that now the range of individual differences between the people, that my caseload is so different. I have on one end, I might have someone who's a multimillionaire who has 500 employees and working under him who comes in for anxiety management. Then I might have somebody else on the other end who's like the folks I used to work with criminal justice. So I like this. I love this. And I find this is the interesting thing. I find that people are the same no matter who you are. Behind that role, that outer image, people are the same. We're all struggling just to kind of figure out what the purpose of our life is, and struggling with life problems, trying to keep our heads above water. And so this is what I've been doing the past, the past 50 years, this work, and I just thought I'd kind of share that with you to give you an idea as to my background. I'd like now to talk a little bit about service work from a spiritual perspective. Ram Dass helped me a lot to understand service work. He wrote a book, he and Paul Gorman, called How May I Help You? And it was a book about individual stories about individuals who, teachers, policemen, nurses, just individual people helping people in very small ways that no one would ever know about, but doing huge good as a result of that. And he tells the story of this bus driver. He lived in New York City. Every Saturday, for a while there, every Saturday he would teach a yoga class, and he had to take this bus across town. And because the yoga class was the same time every Saturday, he took the same bus every Saturday and was the same bus driver. And he noticed after a few months of riding with this bus driver that every time he got on the bus, he felt this sense of peace. You know, he felt this sense of peace, and he looked at this bus driver, and he had this sense of equanimity about him, peace, of calmness. He's driving this bus through New York City with all this hectic energy, and this this bus driver is at peace. And it made him feel good. It was a perfect setup for teaching the yoga class. And at a certain point, Ram Dass started thinking, I wonder if this bus driver is the Buddha incarnate. Maybe the Buddha has reincarnated, and he's decided to live his life this time as a bus driver in New York City. And the message here is that no matter what job you're doing, you see, no matter what job you're doing, you can be of service to others and help others. And so I always loved that story. Now, my great model and inspiration for service work has always been Jesus. Jesus, when he first gave his first talk in Nazareth to the people that he grew up with, he went to the temple, and he chose to read a scripture that read like this: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised." Now, this was Jesus' great commission to himself. He was telling everybody, this is the purpose of my life. This is why I am here. This is the first time he actually got up and talked in public before people. And he said, he's telling people, this is why I am here. And then the next 3 years of his public ministry, he played all this out. Every day, every moment was a moment of service to others. That was his life. And in Acts, the book of Acts, it's written that this man went about doing good. How are we doing with our lives? Are we going about doing good? You know, we may not have a job or be in a position where we can help millions of people. Maybe we just help 1 or 2 people. Maybe just people in our own family. You know, that's what's important. It doesn't make any difference how many. It's whether or not we're helping anyone, whoever is before us. And Jesus, he is our great teacher on that. Ram Dass taught me that service work, which is love made manifest. You see, service work, unselfish service work, is the expression of love. And love is the direct path to God. So, service work is Ram Dass says, is a vehicle for going home to God. So what could be more important than that? So you might want to ask yourself, what can I do to be of more service to people? Beginning in my family. What can I do to be of more service to my family members? So, I now would like to talk for a few minutes and end my talk here by sharing with you my secret, right, for longevity. My secret being enthusiastic about this work. The work I've done, although it seems easy, I mean, what could be easier than just trying to help people? It's actually pretty tough because you get real involved with people's lives. It's the type of job that when you check out of your office, you don't leave your emotions, at the office. They follow you right home. And so I'm dealing with people with problems, and if I don't know how to deal with that energy that's awakened in me, all the fear energy that's awakened in me, I will burn out. And this is what happens to so many people in this line of work. You come in and you want to help people, and then after a while, you get so overwhelmed that you can't deal with your feelings, and you say, I can't do this anymore. I've seen that happen to many people. So the way I deal with my feelings is I spend every day an hour, at least an hour, in prayer and meditation. I call that my quiet time. That's my gift to myself. We can all make time for God if we choose to. People that say I'm too busy, no, you're not too busy to do, to eat food all day. I mean, not all day, to eat food for an hour. If you consider all the time it takes to go to the grocery store to buy food and to prepare it and to cook it, why not? We need food for our soul too. We're going to make time. We're not going to say I haven't got enough time to eat food. We have enough time to do whatever we choose to do. There's nothing more important than making time for God in our lives. By that I mean making time to connect with our center, connect with God's presence within us. And so I will do this every day. When I have when I have a day off, I will try to give myself an hour and a half. And I will, it's an amazing thing that happens. I actually physically, psychologically, and spiritually feel better at the end of that prayer time than when I went in. The method that I like to use is I like to write out my prayers. I find that helps me to focus. The biggest problem with prayer and meditation is our human mind. Our mind has this tendency to go all over the place. I don't know about you, but that's my mind. And I think we're all like that. We're trying to think about something, and then I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about that. And so we need something to focus on. Every meditation method involves an object that we put our attention upon. For Vipassana meditation, for example, you follow your breath. You have mantras, you chant a mantra. You're focusing on the mantra. Sometimes it's affirmations. A person will keep saying an affirmation over and over again. But the whole purpose of that is to take our attention away from these endless thoughts. The average person has around, we're told, has around 60,000 thoughts a day. These thoughts are just going like this. They're all thoughts about the past or the future. And our mind works like that. Our mind is constantly trying to, bring up problems that we've had in the past, analyze them, work out a solution. The problem is the mind doesn't know when to stop. It just keeps going. And, Eckhart Tolle, who's one of my favorite teachers, says that 80 to 90% of the thoughts that we have that go across our mind are repetitive, compulsive, and involuntary. They just come. We don't ask for the thoughts, they just come. Think of how it is if you wake up at 3 in the morning and you go to the restroom, you come back, and you're trying to sleep, and these thoughts start going. You notice how the thoughts just kind of come out of nowhere? They just start coming. And then I can't go back to sleep because now I'm thinking about something that happened 20 years ago that's way in the past, but my mind wants to bring it up and start thinking about it. And so every meditation method is all about taking my attention off of these thoughts and placing it upon the presence of God, placing it upon a positive thought. And so I have found that really works for me is writing out my prayers to God. I write out, by writing it, it slows down my mind because you can only write but so fast. I write out the prayer. I always start my prayers with prayers of thanksgiving. Thank you so much, God, for this wonderful day. Thank you for helping me today with this, that, and so forth. My prayers always start off like that. Then I ask God to help me with whatever's coming up and things that have been bothering me from like the day before. Maybe I brought home with me from the office. It suddenly comes up. It might have been in my subconscious mind, but now it comes up and I'm able to process it, you see. deal with it, that energy, let it go in the presence of God. And it works like magic. So I'll do this, whatever's bothering. It might be something from work, it might be something outside of work, but I'll write it out. And like I'm talking to God as if he's my best friend, which he is. And so I would suggest that you consider trying this. You know, just call it journaling. Just write out when you're praying to God, instead of just saying, you know, thinking. Actually write it out like you're writing a prayer to your best friend. And it helps you to focus. That's the whole point. Get your attention off all these thoughts. And even when I'm doing this, my thoughts will still be thinking about this, but then I look back what I wrote and I continue, focus me right back where I was a minute ago. After praying for, like this, writing out the prayer for, say, 20 or 30 minutes, I will then look at my books and I'll pull out a spiritual book from a spiritual teacher that is meaningful to me. It's absolutely critical that we all have spiritual teachers in our life. It's absolutely critical that we find spiritual teachers. How do we find the right spiritual teacher? We do that. It's simple. We just ask God to please let us to know him, know her. Let us, and bring to me the teachers that I need that will help me to do this, you see. And the universe will do that. If we don't ask God, if we don't ask the universe for guidance, we won't receive it, you see. All we have to do is ask. So I've had the most amazing teachers my entire life here. I had my first great teacher, 16 years old, a fellow by the name of Emmett Fox. Wonderful. Turned my life around at age 16. Taught me about the teachings of Jesus. He wrote a book called The Sermon on the Mount, and for the first time, I really understood what Jesus was talking about. At least I had an interpretation that made sense to me. And so I had Emmett Fox, and the next great teacher was Edgar Casey. Then I had Ram Das, Paramahansa Yogananda, more recently Eckhart Tolle, and other teachers like that. So I've had the most amazing teachers. And so I'll pull out one of their books, or maybe I might go to YouTube and listen to Eckhart Tolle. And it's amazing how it works. It's like I'm led exactly to the teaching, that moment that I need during that meditation. Whatever I need to hear, it comes to me through this spiritual teaching. Spiritual books are very powerful because Ram Dass says a spiritual book is a transmission of spirit. The individual doing the writing is inspired. He's actually connected, you see, to a very high level of power, spiritual power. He's putting it into words. When you read those words, you're taken to that same frequency, that same energy, you see. So that's why spiritual books, just reading a good spiritual book. The Bible, for example, is to me, Emmett Fox says the Bible is a vortex for spiritual energy. Just reading passages in the Bible can be extremely energizing spiritually to us. The last thing I wanted to share with you in this talk this morning is that I highly recommend that you consider creating an altar in your home. An altar is such a wonderful thing to have. In my home, Marty and I have this an entire room. We call it the meditation room. This room is filled with all sorts of spiritual items. For example, we got our family Bible from 1886. And back in those days, they had these big Bibles, and I got that. And then I have a cross from Iona. I was in Nepal a few years ago, and I have these Buddhist prayer flags. But I collect things everywhere I go. If I find something that I think would be nice to put in the meditation room that somehow reminds me of God, I put it in there. So I walk into this room, and immediately my energy changed just walking into the energy of this room. Now, before I owned a house, Marty and I married each other back in 1986. Before that, I lived in an apartment. I just had a little bedroom as my only private space. No problem. I remember back in the early 70s, I first started doing this. I had all I had was an apartment. I had a little bedroom, my only private space. It's simple. I got a chair, a table, put up a Bible and some other items on this altar, put it right in front of a window. Went down to Pier 1 Imports and bought one of those bamboo shades that fall down from the ceiling. Voila, I have a meditation room right in my own bedroom. And I use that type of meditation room for 20 years, so you don't have to have a house, you don't have to have a whole room, but you do need to have a place where you can go to feed your soul. You see, if you look at your house, it's interesting. Everything in your house or your apartment serves a purpose. You got the kitchen here, you got the bathroom, you got the bedrooms, you got the office, you got the living room. Where's the place for God? You know, why not make a little space there for God? And every time I go there, see, it reminds me of who I am, and it reminds me of God, and basically helps to open the channels. So if you don't have a altar in your home, I'd really recommend that you consider creating one. So this draws my talk to an end. It's been such a pleasure, an opportunity to have this opportunity to talk to you today. I hope that you'll consider looking out there and seeing what you can do to be a greater service to others. There's nursing homes all over the place that love having volunteers to come in to help the patients, the elderly. There are hospitals. There are wonderful places you can do volunteer service work if you're not as fortunate as I was to actually have a job and be paid for it. Thank you so much. God bless you.